What would you do if the man about to become your brother's father-in-law looked right past you like you didn't even exist? Because that's exactly what happened to me. He didn't pause, didn't blink, didn't even offer a cursory nod as he swept into the ballroom like he owned every inch of it. Roland Rowe, the kind of man who signs checks with a pen that probably cost more than my first car, brushed past me like I was coat rack furniture. He didn't know who I was. He only saw the surface, a woman standing alone sipping champagne, no flashy name tag, no husband at her side. He saw what he wanted to see. And that was fine, because in a few minutes when they handed me the mic for a speech, I didn't even know I was giving everything about the way Roland looked at me would change. His posture, his smirk, the grip on his wine glass, all of it. People like Roland don't like surprises, and I had a quiet one coming. But to understand what was about to happen, you'd need to rewind. Not to the engagement or the awkward rehearsal dinner. No, go back 8 years. To the phone call that split my world in two. It was spring. I was 22, midway through finals, exhausted and just barely hanging on. My little brother Julian was 17 one week from graduating high school. Our father had been planning to visit us, just a weekend trip, something simple. Instead, my phone rang at 6:17 a.m. My college advisor's voice was tight. She didn't even say hello, just Elena. There's been an accident. Those words. I still hear them sometimes in quiet rooms or in the space between sleep and morning. Our father was gone. 1 second, he was making plans. The next, nothing. Our mother had disappeared from our lives long ago. She left when Julian was 10, chasing some fantasy of reinvention with a man from Arizona. I never resented her for leaving. I resented her for staying gone. So when my father died, it wasn't just grief we were handed, it was the crushing realization that there was no one left. It was me. Just me. 2 kids, 1 funeral, and a house that suddenly felt like a stranger's. We buried him the following Tuesday, suits that didn't fit, shaky hands passing tissues, people offering casseroles instead of comfort. It was all a blur. But what came next, that was painfully clear. Debt. Our father had been self-employed, an independent contractor, jack-of-all-trades handyman. And somewhere between worksite accidents and slowing business, things had slipped. Hard. Loan balances, missed mortgage payments, equipment liens. I remember opening a letter with his signature on it. He'd taken out a personal loan against the house to protect us, to keep things going. He never told us. But the collectors knew, and they came fast. The house gone. The truck repossessed. His workshop, his pride, was padlocked by week's end. I had packed a small duffel bag for spring break. That was now my entire life. I didn't cry. Not then. Not when I got the call. Not at the funeral. Not even when I watched our living room empty into a moving truck that wasn't ours. The first time I let myself cry was when I came back from the courthouse guardianship papers, in one hand, Julian's transcript in the other, and found him curled on the bedroom floor, knees pulled into his chest like he could disappear into himself. He looked up at me and whispered, "What do we do now?" And I realized he wasn't just asking. He was waiting for me to answer. So I did. I made a promise I hadn't rehearsed, hadn't thought through, hadn't even fully understood. I'll take care of us. I swear. And I did. I picked up a second job at the campus bookstore, then a third as a nighttime courier. I juggled lectures and late deliveries. I slept in 4-hour shifts. Some days I went to class with aching feet and ink-stained fingers. I carried a thermos and prayed it didn't spill on my notes. I skipped every party. I lost friends. I lost the man I was dating. He didn't leave bitterly, just slowly, the way people do when they need more than you have to give. Julian never saw that part. He just saw me make dinner, show up to his parent-teacher meetings, cheer him on at that final football game even though I had to leave early for a shift. He never asked how much I was sacrificing, but I remember every dollar, and I remember the watch. My father's old Omega 1971 Seamaster faded leather strap glass, a little scratched. He wore it every day, tapping it twice before big decisions like it was a ritual. When Julian's tuition bill came due and the FAFSA fell short, I opened my dresser, stared at that watch, and walked it into a pawn shop. It bought us 6 weeks of peace. I never told Julian, I just said it worked out. People talk about character like it's something you find. No, you build it. With your back against a wall. With overdraft fees and cold dinners and the weight of someone else's future on your shoulders. That's where I lived. In that quiet, unseen place. And years later, when a man like Roland Rowe would walk past me without a second glance, I wouldn't flinch because I already knew how to be invisible. But not for long. I didn't graduate with honors. I didn't even attend the ceremony. I signed my last final exam with a dull pen and went straight to the bus stop. Julian had a meeting with his guidance counselor, and I wanted to be there. That was my life now showing up. Not for applause, just for him. The week after I got my diploma emailed to me, I started work at a mid-sized logistics firm, operations assistant entry-level, 45-minute commute. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even particularly good, but it was stable. And after what we'd survived, stability was gold. We moved into a one-bedroom apartment. Julian got the room. I took the fold-out couch in the living room. He offered to trade. I said no. I always said no. I'd already taken everything else, his peace, his comfort, his right to be a normal teenager. The least I could do was give him a door to close. I cooked dinner most nights. Eggs, rice, canned soup when the week ran long. I kept a spreadsheet of every grocery, every utility bill, every cent that passed through my fingers. And I still felt like I was drowning. But one night, somewhere between a pile of rejected grant forms and a sink full of dishes, I made a quiet decision. This wasn't going to be my whole story. I had climbed out of survival mode. Now I wanted more than breath, I wanted direction. So I enrolled in online night courses, certificates in automation back-end systems, low-code integrations. It was all foreign at first, but so was parenting, and I'd figured that out with nothing but panic and persistence. It was during a late-night Slack forum asking about API integrations that I reconnected with Felix Marin. He was a classmate from undergrad, wild hair, bright eyes, always halfway between genius and dropout. Still grinding, he messaged. Always, I replied. That was how it started. Felix and a third guy had been tinkering with a tool, a kind of back-end SaaS system designed for mid-level corporate ops. They had no funding, no logo, and a product so unstable it crashed mid-demo. But they had vision, and that was more than most people. They needed someone who could organize chaos, handle structure, talk to clients, build operations. I hesitated. I had Julian. I had a job. I had responsibilities. But I also had fire. The kind that doesn't go away just because you're tired. So I said yes. From 9 to 5, I was a quiet cog in someone else's machine. From 7 to 2 a.m., I was a builder. We worked from borrowed spaces, coffee shops, library basements, once even an abandoned conference room at a hotel Felix's cousin managed. It wasn't romantic. It was messy, sleep-deprived, often thankless. We coded until our eyes blurred, wrote pitch decks at 3 a.m., and once lost a week's worth of data because someone forgot to back up properly. The third founder dropped out 5 months in. Felix and I stayed. I still don't know why. Maybe because we had nothing else. Maybe because we finally had something. Then came the break. A corporate client agreed to test our tool. We promised 15% efficiency. They got 38%. They told 3 other companies. We didn't sleep for 3 days. Then a tech blog reviewed us, the quiet platform revolutionizing back-end ops. Our inbox exploded, but I still didn't quit my day job. Felix called me a masochist. I called it preparation. I'd lived through a world that disappeared overnight. I knew how fast comfort could vanish, so I hedged. I worked the phones by day and server issues by night. I handled angry clients during lunch breaks and bugs in the women's restroom with my laptop on my knees. Felix became the face. I became the foundation. He gave TEDx talks. I filed support tickets. And I was fine with that. I didn't need to be seen. I just needed us to survive. Meanwhile, Julian. He got accepted into a state university. On merit, his own work. I cried in the shower the night the letter arrived. I paid what his scholarship didn't cover. On time, in full. We had groceries in the fridge, hot water, a functional dryer, and for the first time in years, I breathed. But life has a way of circling back. One night, Julian called me breathless. "Elena, I have something to tell you." I froze. There was a tone in his voice I hadn't heard in years. "I'm getting married." The fork in my hand clinked against the bowl. To who, Ariana Rowe? The name hit me like static. Rowe. I knew that name. I'd heard it on conference calls, seen it on proposals. Roland Rowe. I didn't say anything. I just whispered, "Tell me about her." He told me everything. How they met at a campus event. How Ariana was sharp-poised, compassionate, the opposite of the ice-cold family dynasty her last name suggested. How she didn't flaunt wealth or pedigree. She taught chess to kids on weekends. She laughed at his nerdy references. She saw him. I listened, carefully, quietly, because I wasn't worried about her. I was worried about her father, Roland Rowe, founder and CEO of Rowe Industries, a man whose company name alone made junior analysts sweat and tech founders fantasize about buyout offers. We'd never met in person, but I knew him. He'd tried to acquire our platform 3 separate times. Lowball offers, wrapped in velvet language. The kind that says we admire what you've built while holding a match behind their back. We declined every time. His final email had read, "If you change your mind, let me know before the big boys move in." I never replied. So when Julian said the words, "Her father wants to meet you," I felt the slow crawl of fate behind my ribs. I agreed to dinner. I didn't tell Julian about the business connection, about the offers, about the podcast clip I'd saved where Roland casually dismissed our company as a neat prototype, but nothing scalable. Because this wasn't about him. This was about Julian. And if Roland was about to be family, if he was going to try and buy his way into our lives, I needed to know what kind of man I was dealing with up close. I cooked. I always cook for people I need to read. Something about the rhythm, the proximity, the scent of a stove makes the mask slip faster. They arrived on time. Julian beaming. Ariana gracious, sharp-eyed, and instantly likable. And Roland, he didn't come. Some unexpected board obligation, Julian said. I didn't buy it, but I kept my face neutral. We sat, ate, talked. Ariana was warm and clearly adored my brother. She asked about our childhood, our father, and how we'd gotten through it. I watched her expression soften when I told her the truth, filtered and clean. After they left, Julian lingered by the door. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm just surprised," I replied. "But I believe you. You love her with everything. Then that's enough for me." Weeks passed in a blur of wedding planning emails and back-end updates. Felix and I signed 2 more enterprise clients, neither of them Rowe Industries. I didn't reach out. I didn't have to. Then came the engagement dinner, held at a private suite inside one of those sterile, overpriced country clubs. White linen, tall floral centerpieces, the kind of place where they don't serve water, they present it. I wore a black dress, simple, clean, no jewelry, no flash, just presence. When I arrived, I saw Ariana and Julian across the room laughing with distant cousins. I scanned for Roland. He saw me before I saw him. His eyes slid across me, paused for a half second, and then moved on. Just like that. We were formally introduced a few minutes later. "This is Julian's sister," someone offered. "Elena Trent." He shook my hand like it offended him. "Oh, you're just the sister," he said like my presence was a clerical note in an otherwise flawless contract. I assumed their mother would be here. "Our mother moved on years ago," I said evenly. "Ah," he replied. No apology, just a dismissal packed in a syllable. Then the inevitable question. "So, what is it you do?" I smiled. "I work corporate." Not a lie, just not what he needed to know. He nodded vaguely and moved on as if that single sentence gave him all the permission in the world to disregard me completely. I watched him walk away the back of his custom suit, crisp and unbothered, and for a moment I felt that old burn of invisibility, that sharp, clean pain of being unseen. But it passed, because I didn't come for him. I came for Julian. Still that little voice inside, the one I'd kept buried under years of humility and restraint, whispered something dangerous. He's going to regret that. Later that night I told Felix. He laughed so hard I thought he'd choke on his protein bar. "You're telling me the Roland Rowe met you and still doesn't know who you are?" I shrugged. Let him find out the fun way. Felix raised a toast. To poetic justice. I didn't laugh, because I had a feeling the punchline was coming soon. Weddings are funny. Everyone's watching the couple, sure, but just as many are watching each other. Who's seated where? Who gives the best toast? Who cries, who doesn't? Who wears control and who loses it? I wasn't interested in any of that. I came for Julian, for Ariana, for the beginning of something soft and honest in a family that seemed built on steel. The venue was pristine, a lakefront estate draped in sunset tones, golden roses, laughter bouncing off crystal. The kind of wedding you'd see on the cover of a lifestyle magazine captioned, "Elegance Meets Legacy." I stayed quiet off to the side. Julian looked radiant, nervous, proud, like the man I'd raised and barely recognized now, grown and glowing. Ariana was grace in motion. She spotted me before the ceremony crossed the room and hugged me without hesitation. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." I smiled. That was enough. The ceremony passed like a dream, but the reception, that was reality. Roland was in his element, shoulder-clapping executives, toasting relatives, smiling like the patriarch of a well-oiled dynasty. His tux was custom, his cufflinks probably older than Julian. And once again, he brushed right past me. Didn't stop, didn't blink, didn't see. But that was about to change. Because somewhere between the toasts and the cake, cutting a young woman with a headset and clipboard, approached me half-panicked. "You're next," she said breathlessly. "We're behind schedule." Next for what I blinked. The speech. You're listed maid of honor or sibling speaker. I looked toward the head table. Julian caught my eye and smirked. He did this. I hadn't prepared a speech. I hadn't written notes or rehearsed. But I had something better, the truth. So I stood, straightened my dress, walked to the stage as the DJ turned down the music. The room quieted slowly like a tide pulling back. I took the mic. No trembling, no hesitation. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady but warm. "I'm Elena Trent, Julian's sister." Soft murmurs, heads turned. But growing up, I wasn't just his sister. I was, for lack of a better word, everything else too. The room stilled. Our father passed away when I was 22. Julian was 17. There was no backup plan, no life insurance windfall, no helpful aunt flying in from out of state. It was just us. Roland's wine glass paused mid-air. I was still in college, but I filed for guardianship, picked up 3 jobs, and made a promise to keep us afloat. I cooked meals on a hot plate, delivered packages on foot, paid tuition with pawn shop cash, and Julian, he rose. Every step I took to hold things together, he met with resilience and grace. Across the room, Julian was crying, and so was Ariana. I glanced toward Roland. He had turned fully now, eyes locked on me. I continued. During those years, I also helped build something else, a startup. My co-founder Felix and I started with $87 and a glitchy Wi-Fi signal. Now our platform supports back-end operations for companies across the country. Some of you may even use it. A subtle ripple moved through the room. I let it land, but I didn't come here to talk business. I came to say this, Julian. You are the most remarkable human I know. You carry kindness like armor. You loved me even when I didn't have time to love myself. And Ariana, you see him. Truly. Thank you for that. I paused. Let the silence stretch. You two are beginning something powerful. Not because of wealth or legacy, but because you've chosen each other fully, and that above all else is worth celebrating. Applause rose louder than I expected, but I didn't stay. I stepped down, handed off the mic, and made my way back toward the table. I didn't get far. Roland intercepted me. "Elena," he said, voice tight. That was unexpected. I looked at him, calm, measured. "Was it I had no idea you were that Elena Trent?" I smiled, slow and deliberate. "The one whose company you've been trying to acquire for the past 6 months?" His face faltered. "You never said. You never asked." He opened his mouth, then closed it. I gave him a polite nod. "Have a good evening, Mr. Rowe," and walked past him without looking back. The rest of the night glided by with champagne music and joy that didn't feel manufactured. Julian and Ariana moved across the floor like they were floating. Felix found me near the terrace and simply said, "Well, that was a mic drop." I shrugged, sipped my sparkling water, and watched the stars bounce off the lake. But the moment that stayed with me wasn't the applause. It was Roland's silence. He didn't speak to me again that night, not in front of anyone at least. But he watched. The kind of watch that businessmen do when they realize they've underestimated an asset they can't control. And I let him. Because I'd already made my choice long before the wedding. We'd never sell to him, not out of ego, not even out of revenge, but because we'd built something that didn't need to answer to men like Roland Rowe men who only offer respect after they run your name through Google. The next week, a fresh offer landed in our inbox. It was double the previous one. Felix looked at me across the table and said, "You know, we could walk away right now. Cash out, never worry again." I nodded. "I know. But we didn't build this to exit," I said. "We built this to exist. On our own terms, without bending." He grinned. "Then we decline. And we did. Rowe Industries continued licensing our software. They remained one of our largest clients. We provided support updates and integration tools like we would for anyone else. No discounts, no favors, no callbacks from Roland. It became strictly transactional, exactly how he liked his relationships. Except this time, we set the price. Julian never brought it up. He knew, of course, he wasn't oblivious, but he respected the boundaries, knew which lines not to cross. And Ariana. She surprised me one Sunday over coffee. She looked up from her mug and said, "Thank you for what you said, for the way you let me in." I blinked. "You make him better," I told her. "Not because he needs fixing, but because you see him clearly. That's rare." "He learned that from you," she said softly. "That meant more than any venture milestone we ever hit." Julian eventually started teaching 2 cybersecurity workshops for high school students. He and Ariana planted a garden in their yard. He called every Sunday, sometimes just to ask what I cooked for dinner. I never told him, but I saved his voicemails, every single one. Felix and I continued to grow the company slowly, intentionally. No outside investors, no flashy stunts, no race to be acquired, just solid tech, loyal clients, quiet power. That was enough. Sometimes I still get invited to panels and conferences. They want the elusive co-founder, the woman who built a platform and walked away from the spotlight. I say no mostly. Not because I'm afraid to be seen, but because I've learned something. People like Roland never understand. You don't need recognition to prove your value. You need peace. Peace is knowing you made it without cutting corners. Peace is knowing the people who matter know the whole story, even if the world never does. And peace is when your brother dances at his wedding like he was never the boy crying on the bedroom floor. People like Roland build empires. They trademark their names. They buy buildings, slap on logos, and call it legacy. But I've learned legacy isn't built on visibility. It's built in quiet rooms during hard years with no witnesses. It's not measured in headlines or handshakes. It's measured in what survives after the applause fades. My legacy. It's my brother laughing in the kitchen on a Tuesday. It's the way he looks at Ariana like she's both compass and home. It's the garden they water on weekends and the young women Ariana mentors in coding workshops. It's the house with a swing in the backyard, not because it's fancy, but because joy belongs there. It's knowing that the version of Julian who once shook from grief now stands steady. That's the return on my investment, and it pays better than any acquisition ever could. Felix and I still run the company. We've turned down more offers than I can count. Not because we're stubborn, because we're rooted. We don't need a seat at someone else's table. We built our own. And if people like Roland finally recognize who we are, what we built, well, that's nice. But their recognition was never the goal, because true respect, it doesn't come from resume lines or stage lights. It comes from who you kept warm when the world went cold. It comes from how you show up before the cameras, before the toasts, before the mic. And if there's one thing this journey taught me, it's this. You don't rise by being loud. You rise by standing still in your truth, quietly, firmly, without apology. When people finally notice, let it be on your terms, not theirs. Because at the end of the day, what matters isn't who applauded you. It's who still had a roof because of you. It's who stood tall because you bent without breaking. And it's who walked into the world fearless because you lit the way. That's the kind of legacy I'll leave behind. And honestly, that's more than enough for me. If you've ever been underestimated or carried someone through their hardest season, drop your story in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you believe quiet strength is still strength. Because sometimes the loudest impact comes from the ones who never needed to shout.